Welcome to the PHED Committee. This is final work on tying the bow on the affordable housing work we've been engaged in. So, Ms. McMillan, would you like to take us through this?
So these are the implementing regulations associated with Bill 3417, which were your updates to the MPDU program. I just wanted to say 3817 doesn't really need any implementing regulations because the requirement there is that Park and Planning will produce a map, and then that will be the baseline for the requirement of MPDUs. So this is more about the internal workings of DHCA in administering the MPDU program. The goal, as you know, is to have all this wrapped up by October 30th, and so if you all are able to approve the regulation to go to council today, then we can take it on October 23rd. I do just want to say I've looked through the regulations. I'm recommending approval as submitted in the packet. I've gone through sort of the larger items of interest. There's a lot in the regulation which is extremely hard to read with brackets and underlines, but there's just a lot in the regulation that's updating language and, you know, small technical changes. And so we've tried to highlight for you some of the more substantive changes that have gone with the bill. I can either go through those or I can answer questions, whatever you want to do. I'm not recommending any changes.
Well, I've got to say, this is really testament to what it is that you actually do, Stephanie, and all of you at DHCA when you review these MPDU applications, the process, the math that you have to employ, the specifics that you need to apply, the calculations that are involved. I mean, I wish people could see how carefully we worry about all the details associated with a moderately priced dwelling unit program, and the challenges of just getting it right and making sure that the rules are adhered to. This is really, really something. 43 pages of regulations. I guess I've seen this before. I must have, but it's really something. Mr. Leventhal, you have a question
I do.
before we hear more from the staff?
I do, I have a question. Well, it's a substantive thing, but among the changes are that the purchaser must be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, and I guess that was not there before, and I assure you that if we don't ask about this in committee, well, even if we do, some council members will have questions about it. I don't think the MPDU program on its face has any nexus to federal funding, and in general, we have not in Montgomery County even requested citizenship information from applicants for county services unless the service is funded with federal dollars. So this seems like an unusual step. So I have a concern about it. It doesn't seem consistent with how we generally interact with county residents.
Right. I'm Stephanie Killian, Chief of the Housing Division for the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. With me is Lisa Schwartz, who's a senior planner for our staff and really the architect and author of these regulations. Clarence Snuggs couldn't be here today. He's at a MLS meeting in Silver Spring. But to answer your question, that's why we highlighted this issue as one of the changes, because we knew it would raise questions. This is not, this is addressing a very minor enforcement issue that we have. And the reason it's a minor enforcement issue is because lenders require that someone be a permanent resident of the United States before they'll give them a mortgage. And most landlords want someone to be a resident of the United States for the term of the lease. And that's for protections for the mortgage company and the landlord. The problem we find is very rarely, but it's happened occasionally, when someone who's on a tourist visa in the United States or is here on business buys an MPDU with cash because it's cheaper than getting a long-term stay hotel. They buy the MPDU with cash, literally bring a suitcase of cash to the closing, and then stay in it temporarily. It's not their permanent residence, which is a requirement of the MPDU law. And what ends up happening is an enforcement issue that they end up renting the unit out. So we felt like this was an important clause just for the protection of the program, because it's very difficult or nearly impossible to check the income and verify the income of someone who's not in the United States permanently and who's not earning income in the United States. So that's the purpose of it. It has nothing to do with any other concerns like if someone's documented in the United States or any issues like that. It's solely an issue of, in order to own an MPDU, it must be your permanent residence, which
Yes.
means you must be a permanent resident of the United States.
Okay.
In order to rent an MPDU, most landlords check and make sure you're here permanently. We have the authority to make waivers of this. We've done that twice already. One was a waiver of someone who was in the United States on a political asylum, so they weren't technically on a permanent visa, but so we waived it for that provision. We also had someone who was worked at an embassy. Officially, they're permanent residents of their home country. This person had been in the United States for a long time, so we waived it for the rental. This does come up from landlords as a question. They'll call us and say, I have someone who's has a student visa for 3 months. You know, are we allowed to rent to them? Because we require 1-year lease in the MPDU program. So it's a very technical issue addressing a very small enforcement issue.
I'm not comfortable with the explanation. So, and it does have to do with whether someone is documented. I mean, absolutely it does. It's inherently connected to that. So I understand what you're saying. Our purpose was not to issue some raid or, you know, share information with the federal government or anything. I understand that's not your purpose, but the effect is, of course, to exclude undocumented people from this sector of the housing market. That is what it will do. It will do just that.
It is not presenting any more exclusion than the industry or the market already does. So we're not adding anything, a layer of review that's not already there by others. This is only to prevent a small level of enforcement and some problems we found with, like I said, people coming to a closing with paying cash, which we all know is not the population that was envisioned for this program.
Yes, indeed. I hear,
And like I said, we can provide a waiver whenever it's necessary.
I hear very clearly what it is that you're saying. And I understand that a couple of circumstances came up that the department found were problematic, and that new language was added to address those problematic circumstances. My concern is that the new language will create other problems. So I do hear what you're saying, but I have a concern. I'm not comfortable.
Understand.
Okay.
Can you explain a little bit more?
Well, in general, we tell the community that county government, with its own resources, never requests immigration status. That no resident in Montgomery County should ever fear, for any reason, interacting with Montgomery County, because we don't ask their immigration status. The only time we ever ask immigration status is where it has to do with entitlement for federal funding. So this is in direct contradiction to that. We are specifically asking people's immigration status for a housing benefit. That's something we have been saying for a long time we don't do. And I did hear what you said, that this unusual situation where some Nigerian prince, you know, was giving away lots of money on the internet and came in with a suitcase full of cash and bought up a bunch of MPDUs, that, I'm sorry that occurred. That may have been an abuse of the system, but I think this new language will create other problems, so I have a concern about it.
We don't, we do not carry this requirement down to the nonprofits. If the nonprofits are providing services to someone who is not here in permanent status, and we don't check the status of anyone that the nonprofits are working with. That's not the goal of this provision. It's solely on the homeownership side predominantly.
I mean, could you not have a requirement like you may not pay cash? I mean, if you're trying to solve such a discrete problem?
That is one of the problems. It's a twofold problem, being able to verify income, and also that the way people get around it and the purchase is buying cash. You're right. We could provide that. I'd have to think through, and I'd have to talk to the county attorney's office on that.
I mean, we all know that there are long-term residents who are, although they are not classified this way, they do not have a green card, are indeed permanent residents. They may have U.S. citizen children who are in our workforce, who
Yes.
are stably employed and who are going to be here long-term. And the effect of this is that those long-term residents, of whom I think there are likely far more who meet the income category than someone who has
Yes,
a suitcase full of cash to put down on a housing unit, that seems like a very unusual example of people in this income
It
category.
is, but the issue we're dealing with here is unusual.
Yes, indeed. So I think that by addressing the issue, the unusual issue, through new language that will require that everyone document their citizenship status or their residency status, you are creating a different problem for a larger group of people than that small group of people who carry suitcases of cash around
We
to
accept
buy housing. That's a
We
very,
accept
very
it.
unusual example.
self-certification. People certify on the application form that they're a permanent resident. The only way we ever question it is when we do background checks on all applicants to make sure that they don't own other houses. We do it through a service called LexisNexis. If we found in that survey something that raised questions about the person being here in the United States and what the reasons why they'd be purchasing the MPD, we would question them then. But that's the only way we actually require documentation.
Okay. Well, again, I personally have assured
Understand.
my constituents many, many times that Montgomery County does not request
Understand.
the citizenship status or immigration status of people applying for county benefits. This is inconsistent with that, and I have a concern about it.
Understand. We can talk to the county attorney's office to see if there's some other language that might be preferable and come back to you if you want us to.
What is the schedule for this?
If you,
For this
I'll let-
kind of regulation?
So,
I know we have to do it this month, but
right,
Uh,
so if the committee is asking for a change, so it's up to the executive, obviously, on a regulation to submit a change. So if the committee is requesting a change, that sometimes can be turned around in a couple days. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes an executive doesn't wish to make a change.
You could look
but-
at some additional language before it had to go to the full council.
Right.
You know, if there's another way to say this that is not so direct, I think that addresses the concern that's been raised. If you're already, conducting an inquiry into the ability to establish residency for the terms of the lease, if you're already doing that, it would seem to me that would be relevant to the ultimate conclusion anyways. And that is your fundamental issue. If there's a financing issue, it's really not your problem, it's their problem.
that's the
Right.
way the MPD program's always operated, it's up to the purchaser to obtain their.
Pardon me?
We've already operated under the philosophy that whoever's buying an MPD, it's their responsibility to
To
obtain
handle
financing.
to satisfy the financial
A
element.
typical question we'd get from a landlord, just to explain, is landlords do require proof of like a driver's license or something like that. And people will, we've had instances where applicants will provide a copy of their social security card and it has an expiration date on it. And that's when we get questions from landlords.
And there might be situations where, under, as you say, a nonprofit situation, that's not something you're involved in
Yeah.
anyways. So then you're dealing with a narrow, I think the question is there a way to achieve the same end with recognizing the system, the protections that are already in place? What you don't want is the person who owns another home elsewhere benefiting from this.
Right.
What you don't want is someone who is using this and turn it around for some other purpose. And that is not necessarily protected under this scenario anyway.
Right.
So there's that.
U.S.
Why don't-
citizens are well known to invest in rental property. Happens all the time.
Well, all kinds of people
Right.
like to invest in rental property.
Being a U.S. citizen
and
doesn't
want
prevent
to-
them from.
Want to avoid, well, and they want to avoid, it's a business operation, and that's not what we're trying to do.
Right.
We're trying to provide housing for the individual applicant. So how you make that determination of their intention to reside in the property and what the extenuating circumstances are part of the evaluation that would be conducted, correct? So why don't you look at how that could
can.
could be written, and then if you can circulate that to the committee before the 23rd,
We will.
that would be good, if you could look at that in the next few days.
We can.
Okay, any other questions?
No, I appreciate the chair's point. It seems to me that simply certifying that someone is a U.S. citizen doesn't provide the protection you're looking for.
It-
So that's all. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, that-
Right.
We'll look at some alternative
Yeah.
language.
That would be great. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, so this is a you all are done, so thank you very much. This is a historic moment. This is our last PHED committee meeting.
All right.
So we have ordered up certificates for my colleagues here. You're going to get a similar one, Mr. Reamer. This is a committee certificate to Councilmember George Leventhal in recognition of his grit and perseverance. As
you.
of today,
Excellent.
we have had, we don't know how many committee meetings.
Hundreds.
We have had to involved in, I don't know how many hard decisions. We have tried to work through so many important issues, and I want to thank you all. Same thing, Council President Hans Reamer, for your grit and
you.
perseverance.
Thank you.
Not so easy being on this committee.
Nice.
Miss McMillan, we have a certificate for you in recognition of your patience and responsiveness. And I have a similar certificate from Mr. Zients. Although it should have said, and his great writing skills.
And his footnotes. You could footnote that.
We should have had this in a footnote. We
Yeah.
had 10 minutes to put this together.
It's certainly not for my spelling ability.
And we also have one for Marlene, who is busy doing the Lord's work on behalf of the next council, as far as I can tell. But I want to thank you all. It's been a great run. We've made.
Thank you, Chair
It's been an
Verlaine.
interesting time, hasn't it? And there's the phone.
Sorry.
That's really kind of. That sort of nails it, right? Working on all burners all the time. Thank you very much. It's
you,
been an honor and a
you,
privilege.
Nancy. Really
Thank
has
you,
been.
everybody. And thank you, DHCA, and everybody else who's come to all these meetings and been supportive and helped us solve so many important problems for the community.
Quite a chapter in the county's council history.
When you
Coming
think-
to a conclusion with your service as Fed Chair has had a big impact.
When you think of all the master plans we've done, all the zoning text amendments we've done, we rewrote the zoning code, we've rezoned most of the county, and we're always changing things and trying to address the circumstance that comes along the way with thoughtful questions, good insights, trying to move us forward into a great future. You guys have really made it happen, so I want to thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
Great
very
to
much.
serve on this
Okay.
committee.
Do we drop?
That was fun.
You need a microphone.
I wish I had a mic to
Mic
drop.
drop, Coach.
Thank you. Goodbye.